Welcome back to Products and Health Tech, a community for health tech product leaders by product leaders. I'm Chris Hoyd, Director of Products at Vinyl. Today, we're going to dive into a discussion I had with John Baisch, Director of Product Management at Healthwise in Boise, Idaho. Healthwise is a nonprofit organization that delivers educational healthcare content through EHRs and other UIs to empower patients and providers. John and I discussed how he structured the team at Healthwise, how he instills a positive culture at the company, their approach to build versus buy, and some of the innovative new capabilities that they're in the process of shipping. So let's jump into that conversation. So John, welcome. Can you maybe tell us all a little bit about your story, your background, and how you got into your current position?
Sure. So Chris, I'm an old guy. You know, when we talk about product, I've been doing product management since the probably early 90s. And I started off as an engineer. I actually, went to tech school, got some certs, did a lot of work on microwave relay stations, worked for a publishing company, being a tech writer, and then, moving to Boise and working for a technology company based out of Silicon Valley and working on holographic wafer inspection equipment. But also, I also have a software background. When I worked for the publishing company, I was a systems manager back in the days when, Novo networks and all that weren't even around. And then also getting into some deep semiconductor design. So working on printer controllers. And that was my engineering career. But the last company I worked for as an engineer was a company called Spur Products here in Boise, and we worked on printer controllers, and they had nobody in product management. In fact, product management back then was a very early term, and it was kind of in its infancy. And so they said, why don't you take on this position? So product management back then was kind of a jack of all trades. It was project management, product management, marketing, and all of that. And over the years, I went through a lot of different training and frameworks, but was in that company for about 6 years, and then took a job as a software product manager for a large enterprise software company, and did that for about 12 years, and then went to the startup world. And I ran a product team there and a solutions team and also a sales team at the same time. And we actually jumped into the healthcare market at that point, and we had a solution for helping organizations that work with individuals with developmental disabilities record the progress and just kind of look at their programs and look at longitudinal programs based on that, and kind of grew my career in the healthcare space there. But then at the same time, being a startup, you have to, look at getting traction, and we expanded to other markets. So oil and gas, agriculture, manufacturing, and all different types of areas. But about 4 years ago, I thought it was time for me to, make a jump. And Healthwise was a great company that reached out to me. I did some projects back with them back in the early 90s. And I came in as a product manager there. And I had just some basic healthcare experience. So just working in the mental health care space. But our organization actually provides education to the provider, the payer space, so insurance companies, hospital systems, and so on, and some of the largest systems in the U.S. and in the world, and really built up my competency in the healthcare space just by the School of Hard Knocks. And a couple of years ago, I ended up taking over the product management team here, and we had a small group, and now we've grown to over 10 product managers in the organization. So a combination of product owners, product managers, and technical product managers. So that's a little bit my background. I know it was a little lengthy, but like I said, I'm an old guy.
No, that was perfect. Thank you, John. And a very, very compelling, I think, kind of diverse background to help paint a picture of how you got to where you are. So, I think product work can be super context specific, right? If it's an early stage company or a more mature company, it might depend on the industry. That might depend on how the organization thinks about, how a product department should be structured or how the development process should take place. Can you talk a little bit about, I know you've seen a lot of those different versions.
Yeah.
How have you structured it at Healthwise? And maybe talk a little bit about why.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So when I first started here, we had just large development teams that worked across multiple different problem spaces. So, in the healthcare space, you have point of care, so physicians working directly with patients. In the payer space, insurance companies working with care managers for individuals with chronic conditions. And but our product team wasn't really focused around that. It was more so, you've got this product, and so on. And over the last couple of years, we created a new organizational structure. In fact, I came out with a new organizational structure with my partner, our VP of product, in the October-November timeframe. And we've changed the organizational structure in January, along with some other things we did for the company from a cultural standpoint. But I want product managers to own problem areas. And so point of care, got a strategic product manager and a technical product manager that leads that space, one for the care management space. And then we also have products that span both markets. And so we went from 3 development teams, into 8 development teams. And so we've got squads that include a product manager, a UX designer, a product marketing manager, in some cases, a technical product manager. We're looking at things like integration, APIs, and then a dev manager, and then the developers. And we made that change in the December timeframe. We actually, the teams in January kind of stormed and normed, which was expected. And we've done some changes, shifting of responsibilities between the two, especially in our services end. But we have seen more velocity probably in the last 6 months than we have in the last 4 years that I've been with Healthwise. And so it's really helped because we get subject matter experts in that space and paired up with a product marketing manager. And if, some organizations don't have the flexibility or the funding to have a product marketing manager, but they really do take a lot of the pressure off the product manager when it comes to working with the account managers, the sales team, and so on. They also help the product managers in some degree, especially if they're new, kind of get up to speed with the market. So not all of the product managers that I hired, and I've hired about 7 over the last 7 months, and not all of them came from the healthcare space. So there's a lot of learning associated with that, but there's also some strategic things that I did when I hired the product managers, looking at their personality style, what they know and what they don't know, and understanding how I can fill those gaps.
Very cool. That's a pretty recent change that you made, and it sounds like a massive restructure that has been really impactful for the organization. That's great. Yeah. And I think that kind of represents some of the leading thinking in product right now, right? That it's you shouldn't necessarily orient around a UI surface or anything as specific as that, but really focus on the problem at hand and build a team around that to solve for it. Interesting. And so you also touched on, I think, the importance of sort of healthcare specific knowledge for really unlocking a lot of velocity there. Yeah. Would you say healthcare is unique as an industry in the amount of kind of background knowledge that it requires to be effective?
It's unique, but that background knowledge, you can get up to speed relatively quickly. And I think, just using product marketing frameworks or processes to learn and dig in and have more conversations. We use a combination of different frameworks. I've always been a kind of a pragmatic model person, but we don't follow it to the T. But those individuals that may not have come from product management. So I did hire individuals that didn't come from product management. Some were business analysts. Some were early in their career working on, as a director of client services. I brought an individual in from there. I'm hiring him as an associate product manager, but giving them the tools to help them understand how to drill into those problems with clients. You can learn a lot about the market. And then also, Healthwise, we're an education provider. So education is pretty important to us. And so I have given all of our team a lot of budget for educating themselves in specific areas. So, learning the foundations, you're looking at building, working with developers, getting the insights around that, and drilling into that. So working, depending on the organization and how flexible they are, having those conversations, getting them out in the field. There is that old saying for a pragmatic that says, nothing happens in the office. Well, it's true, but the last 2 years have been really difficult because we're in the healthcare space and our clients don't want us to come on site. They're overburdened with, patients. They're overburdened. They're also overburdened with the lack of velocity, I would say, in outpatient services, or those services that like colonoscopies or so on. So now those are all starting to pick up, but they're behind. And so the healthcare space really changed quite a bit over the last 2 years. But the nice thing about it is that we've got a lot of great clients that our product team, along with our partners and our sales team and account managers, work together so they learn more about the market. And it's okay to say, I don't know. Because when they say, I don't know, then we can understand where those gaps are. And it's really helped our team because we're not a command control. I'm not a command and control person. Product managers should have the flexibility to make decisions on their products, but also we want to make sure that they understand that there's an investment there. So what's the market? Is the value? We do our TAM, SAM, SOM analysis. We also do our secondary and primary research, and our products, all of our content is evidence-based, but also our product team has to be evidence-based. So we've created a whole new product lifecycle process for the organization, and we have gates. So we have a discovery gate, we have a demonstration or a proof of concept gate, demonstration, and we call it early adopter and generally available, but early adopter would be, beta and then GA. But each of those gates, we go through a formal process. We've got templates for the teams that they provide that information so that we can make decisions as leaders, but also we're actually there to support them on that. So I always tell our product managers, you have to have tough skin, because you're really not, you don't have as much authority in some cases, unless you have the data to support it, but you always have accountability.
Yeah, the beauty of product management.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the gates, as you apply them to kind of new products or maybe new core capabilities, would you say, like, maybe as a ratio or a percentage, like how much of what Healthwise, the product team, is it bringing new products to market, or is it kind of refining existing models?
That's a great question. It's both. So we're always wanting to innovate. We're constantly innovating as an organization. We've got a great client installed base, but we have competitive pressures. We've been in business for 47 years. We are the cream of the crop with our content. People in the market, in healthcare and so on, like, our local providers here in town, if you go in and you have an appointment, more than likely when you leave, if they're giving you any content that, maybe some PT content, or if you've got a chronic condition like diabetes or so on, you might get content, you might get videos, you might get anatomy sketches. But as part of that whole process, when we think in terms of where we are with the gates and making those decisions, we have new products that we have to modernize. So we want to come out with new capabilities in different areas, and we've done that. And we've made some mistakes. I mean, since I've been here, I killed one product within about probably 8 months I was in here, because if you looked at the numbers, it just wasn't making sense, and the market adoption wasn't there as well. We had another solution that we just sunsetted this last year, and we've also rethought our strategy as an organization. So we've had some organizational changes here from a strategic standpoint that's really helped us. And I think one of the most important things is that product really is there as the voice of the market. And we're trying to make sure that we're following what those needs are in the market, but also understanding how it impacts our strategic focus as an organization, because we're a nonprofit as well. This is the first nonprofit I've worked for, and it's been very interesting because there's different challenges and there's mission-based stuff that we do. So we want to help contribute. Our mission here is to help people live their healthiest lives, and so for us to do that, there's work that we do that we monetize, and then there's work that we do that we want to contribute. So things like contributing to health equity. We've got new solutions in health equity that we want to help provide to those companies that are helping with underserved populations, those that are challenged, both either racially or thinking in terms of financially, or just health equity itself. So constantly innovating. We have to innovate, and you hear the old. All the different leaders in this space, innovate or die, right? And we eat and breathe that.
To parse something interesting in there, you said you've sunset a couple products that just didn't have the data, didn't have the numbers. How do you guys think about KPIs internally? Do you, is that an accountability dimension for PMs, or is it just,
So we use OKRs, so objectives and key results, and we review those quarterly. We're actually talking about doing a little bit of a hybrid balanced scorecard model, but we enacted OKRs when I first started here and failed miserably. It was like, you either do roof shots or you do moon shots when you're creating an OKR. And I think we did Saturn shots on some of those. So, it was just like, and we were kidding ourselves on measuring it. So really looking at the data on, these key results that we're expecting, how do we measure that? And does it align with the strategy? Does it align with the product? Does it align with the market? And going back and doing that validation to make sure that truly we are making a difference and we're moving the needle. So everybody has that, like roadmaps. We weren't roadmap heavy when I first started here. And now we've got roadmaps that we review on a quarterly basis. We've got our internal roadmaps, our external roadmaps, and our teams want us hold us accountable to it. So we use our safe harbor statements to kind of help us, because as we learn, we make modifications, and we make modifications to our OKRs. So all this drives right back up to our strategic direction as an organization, and then we share that with the organization. So this is the nice thing about Healthwise, is that we are very transparent to every employee. So from our building guy, he knows everything that we're doing in our direction as an organization, and he could probably state, what our direction is and our 3 or our 5 initiatives that we have for our fiscal year.
Very cool. I want to circle back also to something you said maybe 10 minutes or so ago, which along the lines of the changes you made to the product organization, it sounds like you made some that were more just focused on culture generally. And I think that's as important as anything to, especially for a PM role that has, needs to rely on influence rather than authority. Culture is so important. So can you talk a little bit about what you did there?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that we've done from a cultural standpoint. We want our employees to, this last couple of years have been a challenge. We lost a number of employees due to, the great retirement, but it's not really a great retirement. They're looking for something that, for more money, that might be, and that's okay. If we're looking for something that, is going to help our family and we're going to make more money, that's great. But Healthwise recognized that. And so a lot of the things that the organization did and what we did within our product team really helped build the culture that we have today, that our retention, I haven't lost a product manager in the last, it's going to be coming up on a year in September, I think it is. So that's pretty good, especially when you've got that many product managers. But some of the things we did, let me just talk about first organizationally. So we went to a 4-day work week. We started experimenting that in August of last year. The board approved it and finalized that in February. And we found that people spending time, having those 3-day work weeks or weekends are absolutely phenomenal. And we got a lot more productivity out of the team because they want to protect those 3 days. Our CEO, Adam Husney, actually proposed this. We're in a couple of studies right now. We're doing some presentations here locally. We were on NBC just recently because of it, but we started measuring it. So every week we started doing surveys. We started getting, me as a director, getting feedback on the productivity, but also looking at those OKRs as well to say, are we actually moving, or did we just take a day out of productivity that could impact us as an organization to meet our strategic goals? And we found that it was great. There was a little bit of friction there for a little while. And the friction was more so the heightened anxiety because, you feel like, okay, well, I got to get all this done in 4 days. And we did find that meetings, too many meetings, that's when you start doing these things, you start taking 8 hours out of someone's week, meetings become more of a burden. And so we started looking at how we conduct meetings and the types of meetings. If we can do this offline, we use Teams quite a bit. We do make a lot of decisions through Teams, through chat and so on. And just reducing the number of meetings that we have with the teams and also carving out focus time. So on my team, they block out focus time on Wednesdays from 8 till noon, just so they can focus on the things that they need to do and allow their teams to focus on the things that they need to do. From a product management standpoint, we've given more education. So we've added a lot more education. And there's always these concerns in organizations that the more we educate them, then they're going to leave and they're going to find another job. But that 4-day work week with education and the flexibility to do the things that they do, and if they can get it done in those 4 days, that's great. People will, people know that they've got to meet their goals. And if they work on a Friday, that's on their initiative. We don't demand people to do that. And or if they want to work over a weekend, they can do that. And you can find that they're taking more responsibility in their solutions and helping their teams move forward. So addressing those concerns, those personal concerns, and so on. So a lot of changes there. And the education piece, and also having processes. So getting these processes in place so people know what they need to do at what time and what the expectations are. And so we're still learning. It also forced us as well to start thinking more about our process and what is more process need, what do we need to have as more of a standard process, and what are the one-offs that we don't need to have, and not try to boil the ocean with everything with the process.
Predictability, transparency, empowerment. It sounds like you're taking the right calculated risk. It sounds like that's very cool. So you mentioned Teams, which, love it or hate it, is a useful, I think, tool for a lot of teams. I want to ask a very tactical question. What's the software sort of tool stack at Healthwise? You guys use Teams? Do you use AHA or Jira?
So we're actually looking at AHA, but we've used Jira. So Jira was and before COVID, we were Skype. It was again, it was a nonprofit. So the first couple of months in 2020 is when we migrated to Teams, and it was kind of painful for people. And over the years, Microsoft improved it. And we started using Zoom, and we'll use Zoom every once in a while for specific things, but we're primarily Teams. And because Microsoft has done so much good work on building out those needs, and it's that pressure. It's almost like a startup in a way for Microsoft that right. All of a sudden you get this MVP out there, and people are screaming, and they're like, dude, I see the commercials, but I can only do 6 windows.
Right.
And, we have meetings where we'll have 30 people in there. And, so there were a lot of things that we learned, but today Teams is pretty much the norm, and the mobile version really helps as well. Mm-hmm. So of my team, there's only 4 people that are located in Boise, and the rest are all remote. And Teams helps so much because we can have that asynchronous communication as well. We use Jira for our system. So, for doing our epics, our epic of epics, our, all of our tickets and so on. And when we did the changes in the organization, going from 3 major teams and different projects, we're still refining that for the processes with the teams and the expectations, because we want the teams to have the autonomy. But we do have some standard structure that we built within Jira for expectations for building requirements and user stories and what our dev partners are expecting from us. And then we also use spreadsheets. You can't get away from spreadsheets.
Yep.
And cool. And then we've got then we all have all of our other tools that we use just to support the organization, and Salesforce. We've got Salesforce integrated with all of our accounting systems and Jira as well. So when we get cases that come in from our client services, our implementation engineers, those come directly through just our standard workflow within Jira. And then we've also taken and integrated our contractual systems within Salesforce to send entitlement data over to our solutions. So when a new contract is signed, we send entitlement packets over, and subscriptions are already set up. So we've done a lot of automation on the back end.
So I'm curious how a nonprofit like Healthwise thinks about kind of the age-old question of like build versus buy for some core functionality that you want to bring in, right? For a scaling early stage company, it might make sense to build something because you're adding enterprise value, and that leads to a certain outcome down the road. But how do you guys think about it?
So we look at build, buy, or partner. So that's our mantra. And when we look at these projects, so especially with new applications, or if we want to do like instrumentation, so we use Heap for instrumentation, and we use app queues. There are other things that we're looking at within the organization that I'd have to shoot you if I told you. But the point is that our goal is to optimize the value that we provide to the market at a reasonable cost to our organization, so we're getting decent ROIs. And we're not expecting a decent ROI coming out of the gate, But looking at the cost of building it ourselves and maintaining it versus partnering with an organization, we've gotten more, probably in the last 2 years, we've gotten a lot more focused on how we make those decisions. And so when I talk about spreadsheets, all the product managers are expected to provide some type of an ROI initially. And we have a process that we go through as part of our assessment process before we bring something into either discovery, if it's something major that requires an investment, or if it's just a capability that we think we need to bring in the organization, and doing through an assessment, looking at the cost, the ongoing maintenance cost. And by the way, when you partner or you buy a solution, there is still a cost to your organization because someone has to be there to manage that. And what does that look like? So when we, for example, if we looked at, like when we look at HEAP or AppQs, it's only X amount of dollars a year. Let's just say, for example, it's $100,000 a year. It still requires someone on our end, not an FTE, might be a half an FTE, to continue to maintain that and be the voice of the solution. It might also require us to bring in someone as a full-time FTE to help support it as an organization. Now, counter to that, if we built it, then all of a sudden what we're doing is we're pulling resources that should be focused on our core capabilities. And so we have an opportunity cost there as well. So we look at the cost for development. And by the way, we all know that we love our developers, but estimating has always been a challenge. And you find me somebody that can give me an estimate on a major project of Epic and Epic solution that is within a 5% or 10%, plus or minus estimate. I would buy that. I would buy that engineering team because, software is hard. We know that. So when we look at building internally, we have to make a conscious decision to say, is this impact our opportunity? Is it taken from our core focus, or is it the core focus? What's the investment? What's the long-term maintenance on it? And what are those hidden costs that we haven't thought about as an organization? So we have, we go through a list of all finance, our security office. Security sometimes gets overlooked, when you're getting close to, did we do security on it? Our legal expenses and so on. So we look at those very thoughtfully, and we spend the time to do the ROI, but we don't spend so much time that we're sitting out there waiting or late to market.
Now, curious, kind of specific to what your team's working on, kind of a two-part question. Yeah. What's something in the last, call it 3-4 months, in the last quarter, that your team has shipped that you're particularly kind of proud of or excited about? And maybe looking forward, what's something that you're, eager to get out in the market?
So in healthcare, it takes a long time for healthcare adoption. So we just announced in the March timeframe. This is the HIMSS conference. So we announced in the March timeframe a product called Advise for Epic. So it's basically a Fire-enabled application that's iframe, so it's smart on fire within an Epic, a hyperspace environment within the EHR. And it actually recommends content to a clinician that may be working with a patient in an encounter. And it recommends, and we have an OKR centered around that the OKR is that 75% of the time, a clinician would pick one of the top 3 recommended pieces of content for that patient. We are going to GA with that July the 1st. In fact, we just had a review meeting today through our product lifecycle process for the GA approval. And so we do this with the approval basically we get approval from our leadership, and that comes next week. But we do it with all the teams and make sure that we've addressed all the concerns or areas to say, would you support us going to GA on July 1st? And I'm actually really proud of the team. It may not be completely have competitive parity, but it has got some great differentiation, especially with our content in it. And I'm really proud because that team, and it crosses 5 teams. It crosses our administration, our platform team, our API team, our DevOps team, and this is on the dev teams, but it has a resounding effect across the organization. So there's probably 70 to 80 people that are involved in the success of that solution across the organization. It's some phase or it's some aspect of it.
That sounds incredibly innovative and incredibly cool. And and having some sense of how difficult it is to essentially ship anything in healthcare, let alone anything that's going to get in front of a clinician or might empower their decision making. That's massive. So that's very cool to hear. Okay, so maybe just a last question here. Very broad macro view. What trends in healthcare and health tech, whether they apply to Healthwise or not, what are you most interested in? Like, what do you believe in? What's going to be exciting in the next couple of years?
So Chris, I just got back to Boise at 1:00 this morning. I was at the AHIP conference this week in Las Vegas. So the American Health Insurance Professionals. So this is for the payer market. And so it was a 3-day conference, and there were a number of themes. And they had like Governor Gorsuch that came and spoke, Common spoke. But the theme around it was, in the industry, there's a lot of disparity between the relationship between payers and providers, depending on the situation. Health equity is probably one of the biggest issues that's going on with the industry today, and especially COVID really amplified this. So from our concern, thinking in terms of health equity, helping support that, helping support the integration between the payer and the provider to help them have more visibility, a 360-degree view of a patient with, and mostly in chronic conditions. So that's where a lot of our expenses in the U.S. health industry is. We spend more money for healthcare probably than any other country in the world, and it's because of the different silos of how we treat our patients. And it's no fault of anyone. It's more so how our country has evolved, and where we started with, we, instead of being proactive and helping people live their healthiest lives, we're being reactive. That's how Medicare and CMS came about, that, we want to be more active. So helping with those organizations realize their mission and their vision to help get ahead of the game and help us as individuals and consumers and patients and members all extend our lives, but also be able as individuals to make our own healthcare decisions, but have visibility into that. So what's passionate to me is helping everybody, helping our physicians and our insurance companies and our health systems and even our technology vendors. So we have got a lot of healthcare startups. So, and you've heard this over the years, 95% of the healthcare startups are probably going to fail. And that's just because of the industry. And it probably was true because of COVID, because there was a lack of traction in this space. But bringing it all together and helping everybody so that we can reduce the cost and the burden of the organization, but just help people across the board live healthier lives. So those are probably the most passionate things for me. From a product standpoint, I want to see us more focused on the disciplines and building more competency. And when we talk about product managers, I want us not to be product managers. We need to be product leaders. And that is probably the most important. We want us to be passionate about the problem, not passionate about the product.
That's just the perfect note to end on. I could never rob you of that perfect punctuation for this conversation, John. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
You too as well, Chris.
Sounds like you've got some really sophisticated stuff underway. It's really cool to hear. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, John.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks so much for joining us today. If you want to connect with us in the future, you can find us on LinkedIn or YouTube or on our website at productsandhealthtech.com. If you've got ideas, suggestions, maybe you want to be a guest on a conversation in the future, just shoot us an email. We're at info@productsandhealthtech.com. Thanks.